Preparing for closing. Part 7 of this Contract to Close series. Hello, Realtors. Welcome back to my channel. In this series, I've been breaking down the entire Contract to Close process, step by step, to genuinely support realtors by taking the stress out of transactions and showing how a VA company like Swiftcbs Business Solutions can help them work more efficiently. Before we dive in, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the rest of this Contract to Close series. If you're finding these videos helpful, drop a comment below and let me know. Now, let's talk about preparing for closing, because a smooth closing starts with solid preparation. Alright, we're in the home stretch. This is the final countdown before closing day, and our goal here is to triple check every single detail to avoid any last-minute surprises. This is where my due diligence saves me a whole lot of stress later on. First things first, I verify that all contingencies in the contract have been satisfied. Think of contingencies like those safeguards you put in place just in case something goes wrong. I make absolutely sure that each one of these has been checked off the list. That means making sure the financing is 100% approved, not just pre-approved. We're talking about that official loan commitment from the lender, in hand. Next, have all the necessary inspections been done? Did anything come up that needs to be addressed? I make sure any agreed-upon repairs are completed and properly documented, making sure not to forget about the appraisal. Has it come back at or above the sale price? If there's a gap, I notify the agent immediately, as they will need to figure out how to bridge the gap, whether it's the buyer bringing more cash to closing or the seller coming down on the price. Now let's talk about those seller concessions, if any. Have those been confirmed in writing? I want to avoid any misunderstandings or disagreements down the line, so I make sure everything's crystal clear. If any of these contingencies are still pending, I address them immediately. A single missing contingency can throw the entire closing off track and even potentially kill the deal. Next up, we're diving into the closing disclosure, also known as the CD, and the settlement statement. The closing disclosure is a super important document that outlines all the final terms of the loan. The lender is required by law to provide this to the buyer at least 3 business days before closing. This gives everyone a chance to review and make sure everything is accurate. I carefully check that the loan terms, interest rates, cash to close, and closing costs amounts are exactly as expected. Remembering that even a small discrepancy here can cause major issues down the road. And while I'm at it, I make sure both the buyer and seller agree on things like outstanding liens, HOA dues, unpaid mortgage balances, utilities, prorated property taxes. I don't want any surprises popping up at the closing table. Finally, I verify the entire closing package for accuracy. This includes essential documents like the deed, the mortgage note, the title documents, and any required addendums. This is where I put on my editor hat and scrutinize every single detail. I double-check for any spelling errors, name inconsistencies, or heaven forbid, incorrect property descriptions. Now that I've tackled the document review, it's time to shift our focus to the logistics of the closing itself. This means making sure everyone is on the same page and any potential scheduling conflicts are resolved well in advance. First and foremost, I confirm the final closing date, time, and location with all parties involved. And when I say all parties, I mean everyone. The buyer, the seller, the lender, the title company, the real estate agents, and even the closing attorney if one is involved. It's like planning a big event. I have to make sure everyone's calendars are aligned. I must make sure there are no last-minute scheduling conflicts. If so, now is the time to address them before closing day turns into a logistical nightmare. I don't want anyone scrambling to reschedule at the 11th hour. Next up, I ensure all the financial pieces are in place. This is particularly important for the buyer, as they need crystal clear instructions on how and when to transfer funds for closing. Wire fraud is a serious concern these days, so I make sure the buyer is only sending funds based on direct instructions from the title company or the closing attorney. No last-minute email changes, no exceptions. If there's a final walkthrough on the schedule, typically done 24 hours before closing, I confirm the details of that as well. This walkthrough is the buyer's last chance to inspect the property and make sure everything is in order. They'll want to confirm that all the agreed-upon repairs have been completed to their satisfaction, the property is in the expected condition with no surprise damage, and that all appliances, the HVAC system, and plumbing are in good working order. Also, if there were any negotiated seller concessions like leaving furniture or appliances behind, the buyer needs to make sure those items are still there. Now let's talk about potential red flags that can pop up during that final walkthrough and potentially delay closing. One common issue is that the seller hasn't fully completed those agreed upon repairs. Maybe they ran out of time, or perhaps they tried to cut corners. Either way, it's a problem that needs to be addressed. Another issue is unexpected damage to the home. Perhaps a pipe sprung a leak, or maybe some furniture was damaged during the move-out process. Whatever the reason, this needs to be addressed before closing. And finally, I must keep an eye out for missing items that were supposed to stay, like appliances that were part of the deal. If the washing machine has mysteriously vanished, that's going to be a problem. The bottom line is, if any issues come up during that final walkthrough, I resolve them before closing day. Otherwise, the buyer might request a last-minute holdback of funds, a price adjustment, or even a delay in the closing. We're in the final stretch now, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the closing table. But before we break out the celebratory champagne, I need to make sure both the buyer and seller are fully prepared with all the necessary documents and identification. On the seller's side, I confirm they have prepared all the essential documents. This includes the deed to the property, the affidavit of title, a bill of sale if applicable, and any power of attorney documentation if someone is signing on their behalf. I confirm if the seller owes any money at closing, like outstanding liens, HOA dues, or a mortgage balance, utilities, prorated taxes. I make sure those amounts are properly accounted for in the settlement statement. Now, for the buyer, I verify they bring the proper identification and documents to the closing. Acceptable IDs typically include a driver's license, a passport, or other government-issued identification. And this might seem obvious, but those IDs must be valid. An expired ID can bring the entire closing process to a screeching halt. Buyers may also need to bring proof of homeowner's insurance, their final loan approval, and any required cashier's checks or wire transfer confirmations. It's always better to be over-prepared than to be scrambling for missing documents at the last minute. Finally, and this is crucial, I coordinate with the lender to confirm final funding approval. Even if a loan has been approved earlier in the process, it's not truly final until the lender gives the official clear to close, often referred to as the CTC. This means the lender has reviewed all the final documents, everything checks out, and they are ready to fund the loan. I make sure all last-minute lender conditions have been met. This might include providing updated pay stubs, employment verification, or satisfying any additional underwriting requirements. Once I have that clear to close from the lender, I can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that the funds are ready to go. And there you have it, folks. We've covered a lot of ground in this Contract to Close series, and by now, you should have a solid understanding of how much detail goes into Swiftclose Business Solutions' handling of your Contract to Close deal. When it comes to closing organization and attention to detail, you won't find a better virtual assistant company. A smooth closing means no delays, no last-minute surprises, and no stressed-out buyers or sellers. If you want to ensure a seamless, stress-free Contract to Close process, reach out for a free consultation or call 469-846-9459. Swiftclose specializes in keeping transactions on track, so you don't have to worry about the details. Need expert help handling Contract to Close? Let's connect, because closing should be the easiest part of the transaction. And before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a single tip from this Contract to Close series. If this helped you, drop A in the comments.